Insert usual shilling, like, comment, subscribe, rate, whatever you want. Let's begin. I wanted to post some of my minis on the channel because why not? I haven't done that in a while. And I decided, why not do also a lore video? Initially, this was supposed to be about the Red Butchers. Problem is that somehow my brain made the confusion between the Red Butchers and the Devourers, which are totally different things even though they share the same mark of Terminator power armor. It's a little bit interesting, but let's begin with that. Once the Primarchs came to their legions, they started to have these elite units, bodyguards. The Blood Angels had their Sanguinary Guard. Iron Hands had the Murlocs. What was it? Sons of Horus / Luna Wolves had the Justarian. And so on and so on. Paladins for the Dark Angels. You get the idea. Of course, this was something that was bound to happen for the World Eaters as well. And this is a position, like all those mentioned above, was created once the Primarch came back to the Legion. Once he was reunited with his sons. And initially it was a good time. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. You see, this position was coveted. And Angron pretty much supported it and was like, yeah, sure, that's a good idea. To get that position, you had to defeat another, another Devourer in the fight pit to kill him and so on. It was a highly craved position. Everybody wanted it. There wasn't anybody that thought, I don't want to be part of the elite unit that gets to fight side by side with our Primarch. Because in all honesty, it is a pretty good position. It's coveted by many other legionnaires in their specific legions. And it was in the World Eaters as well, because it was an honorable position. And they were all honorable men. But you see, Angron had the Butcher's Nails. And like all other Primarchs before him, once Angron was reunited with his legion, the legion started to adopt the culture of their Primarch into their organization and way of being. And thus, the World Eaters became more savage, more violent. It's an interesting aspect because when you compare Horus Heresy World Eaters to 40k World Eaters, they're totally different things, even despite the fact that those Horus Heresy World Eaters are trying to make Angron happy by emulating his culture. Because at the end of the day, the Horus Heresy World Eaters just want to be recognized by their father. They just want to be like, Dad, pay attention to me, love me. And it is quite interesting, and I think it's what makes it one of the more interesting legions that got a huge boost thanks to the Horus Heresy. So of course they would take in practices like the Butcher's Nails and everything else, fighting to the death if there's discord between two members, getting a higher up position by killing your superior. It is quite interesting how they evolved into this. And the Devourers was one such position that everybody wanted, as I've mentioned before. But in 100 years, the Butcher's Nails kinda took their toll upon Angron's mind. And while initially he was very glad to have them, and he liked the way they wanted to respect him, so the Butcher's Nails kinda took away that reasoning and just left him with a huge disdain for his sons, especially the Devourers. Okay, just the Devourers, to be honest. He hated them. Also not helped by the fact that since they wear cataphracti armor, they're slower on the battlefield, and very few characters can keep the pace up with the Primarch once he goes full berserk mode. And thus, in 100 years, the Devourers turned from this elite unit that walked alongside their Primarch to these shadows walking behind him, never being seen by him, not throwing them a glance or a word, just acting like shadows. In time, this position became despicable. For once, this position was held by the most noble and the best of their legion, and now it was a position for the most undesirable, the weakest links of them all in the World Eater's Legion would get put into the Devourers' ranks. Fun fact, Karn was asked if he didn't think about the possibility of becoming one of the Devourers. At that time, he was still Angron's equerry, and he laughed off this absurd idea. Because in fact, it really was. You see, many of the Devourers just gave in to the Butcher's Nails easily, because they were the weakest of their legions. They would have eventually done that, just made the position more of an insult to be proposed it. And nobody really fought for it. Once, 100 years before the Horus Heresy, they would have fought tooth and nail to get that position, to become part of the Devourers. The blood games, the fight pits, it didn't matter. But in time, nobody wanted to fight for it. Nobody cared about it. What, to be the abandoned son of Angron that he hated? The ginger stepchild of an uncaring father. Funny enough, this is how Perturabo saw himself when it came to the Emperor and his relationship to him. Nice play there. Going back to the Devourers, nobody wanted that position. At some point, there was a fight between a Devourer and an Apothecary, and the Apothecary defeated the Devourer. Rather than giving him the honor of death and killing him, he humiliated the Devourer by letting him live and carving his name into the Terminator armor, which was a big insult. Also, there's another thing to consider when it comes to the World Eaters. The more the Butcher's Nails took root into their mind, the more they affected them, the less organized and cohesive they were. Because that's an important aspect, and that's what made the Devourers not even close in scope or target to something like the Phoenix Guard or the Sanguinary Guard or hell, even the Death Shroud. At the end of the day, these legions could work in a group. They could work together. Their members and brothers knew each other. They knew their roles and what they had to do. Angron's legion was slowly turning into a mindless slaughterfest, which again, not completely true when it comes to the Horus Heresy, but it was still something that they couldn't achieve the cohesiveness that you would see in other legions. And that weakens an elite bodyguard, especially an elite bodyguard that the Primarch hates, that the Primarch didn't need the help of. Even the mere idea of their name infuriated Angron. Devourers, like he somehow named them that. Of course, this all can be called upon the Butcher's Nails, affecting his mind and the minds of his sons. He still hated them. Now, of course, comes an important question. If they were so weak, what happened with them during the whole Ishvan thing? You know, the calling of the legions. We have many informations about World Eaters and the other legionnaires that were on Ishvan 3, but from my recollection, I don't remember any of the World Eaters legionnaires betrayed to be a Devourer. You could say it's pretty hilarious that Angron wouldn't call especially these people that he disdained, but in a way it's not. Angron's bodyguard was created in honor of him, to help him, to serve him. They were loyal to their Primarch first and foremost, no matter if they were loved or not. And that's an interesting aspect, the idea of being loved. They really lacked that love, and they tried to cope with it by many times acting like they didn't care that Angron didn't look at them during the battle. They didn't really see any big problem in Angron running by himself into the middle of the field, as well as them saying that they were not overlooked by Angron, they were not hated by their Gene-Sire. They were still part of his legion and they walked with him on the battlefield. Excluding the fact where Angron just yeets off and does his own thing, which is a very Angron thing to do, and you would expect the elite bodyguard of Angron to know this, but it is what it is. So I don't think any of them, and I don't remember any of them really being on Ishvan and suffering. But there's an interesting parallel, because as I've mentioned in the beginning, I think, I made this confusion between the Red Butchers and the Devourers, because the Red Butchers play a sort of important part in the World Eater story, to an extent, of course, not like Karn or Angron, but still, they play a part there, and their color scheme is a little bit more interesting. I love the Devourers' color scheme, big fan of it. But the Red Butchers are more simple in their design, and I think it would have been easier to paint those. That aside, there's really not that much information about the Devourers and their greater play in the whole thing. Because as I said, they were treated like the ginger stepchild. And because of that, you didn't really get that much out of them story-wise. Though it's interesting to know that there was a Khorne warband known as Devourers, formed from members of the Devourers. But whatever happened to that, I can't really say. What we do know now in the 42nd millennium is that many of the Devourers just either became Chaos Warlords themselves, or join other Chaos Warlords dedicated to Khorne. At the end of the day, when you put things into perspective, did it really matter that they were Devourers? See it from this perspective. It's an honor to be part of the Phoenix, Conclave Squad, whatever. It's an honor to be part of the Gesterion, the Sanguinary Guards, the Murlocs, the 500 Companions. It means something to be part of these units dedicated to their Primarch. But for the World Eaters, this was an insult. To be a Devourer. To run after Angron and not see the glory of battle. To not be seen by him or cared by him. Also, let's ignore the fact that Angron kind of liked butchering people when he had the first chance to do so. Again, all thanks to the Butcher's Nails, of course, but it was a high-risk job with basically no reward to it. Kind of like a wage job or a middle management position, but you lack even the power and authority of a middle management position. So middle management in name only is a proper way to describe the Devourers. In my personal opinion, I think this is a bad way to go for it. Like these Devourers that I've made and painted and still need to fix up here and there, in my opinion, I think they were part of those that Angron wanted to get rid of because he saw them as worthless. Of course, this is just my fanfiction and my way of justifying getting these units to be part of my Horus Heresy Legion army collection. At the end of the day, I think for my unit at least, it makes sense. Lore-wise, the truth of the matter is that nobody really cares about the Devourers at the end of the day. And the few that remained just became either Chaos Lords or started following other Chaos Lords. You can't really say about the Devourers that they left a mark upon their legion, like the Sanguinary Guard, for example. Can't say they left anything at all after those 100 years. Since the Horus Heresy, nobody really cared about them, and they didn't matter at the end of the day. Which, again, is quite tragic, but in a way I can't help but respect their idea of Semper Fidelis, ever loyal. As good and as bad as that might be for them. Now that the lore part is out of the way, here's my experience with painting them. Gold on white, beautiful. It works. You can't even imagine how well it works. Same for the blue and the red, the Khorne red on that. I just like how well they mesh together. I like how well they mesh together in general on this model. But if you're gonna do Devourers, I recommend that you don't do what I did and don't use a black primer, because I didn't know that a black primer turns your white into gray and you need a bunch of layers to have a normal white out of it. And it was a learning process with them. I have to be honest, I like how they look. Sure, of course, some things need to be changed and readjusted here and there. But overall, I like their look and their design. I don't really enjoy the painting white stuff. And recently I've learned the darker the color, the better for me when it comes to painting it. Because it just feels like it. I always had a problem painting what are they called, Imperial Fists, and it seems I have a problem painting white stuff on black or red or whatever. Probably I should invest in a white primer. Overall, this color scheme isn't that hard to do if you have a proper white primer and you go in with just those colors. It works pretty well. There's also an interesting aspect. Remember, the Devourers were the elite units of the World Eaters. They are not really shown to be that ornamented as the Sanguinary Guard, for example, that I always like to bring up because I love the Blood Angels. They're not as well put when it comes to symbols and so on, but I think this lets you get a little bit more creative with stuff. For example, take some models and some parts and some bitsies from the Bloodletters kit or any other Khorne kit, even the old Berserkers maybe could work, and just stick stuff to them to show their changed allegiances. Though at that point, you probably have Red Butchers. And in a way, I would recommend Red Butchers. It just feels and looks like an easier pattern to paint than the Devourers. But I didn't try Red Butchers myself, so overall I'm not really sure about that one. Nevertheless, I hope you liked this lore video, I guess, and I'll see you in the next one.